So howdy, I'm Jeffrey Snover, and
I'm Jason Helmick. And do you want to tell them that you work for Microsoft?
I work for Microsoft.
I don't.
Yeah, so these days, I invented PowerShell. I remain active in PowerShell, but then I got tapped to become the lead architect for Windows Server. And so I did that until last year when we had a reorganization. And so I'm no longer the lead architect for Windows Server. I'm now the chief architect for Azure Infrastructure and Management. And so in Azure Infrastructure and Management, I'm focused in on something called Azure Stack. Everybody know what Azure Stack is? Yeah, okay, so basically you take the kind of core of the public cloud and then you run it on integrated systems in people's data centers. Guess what? Turns out I got gobs and gobs and gobs of PowerShell to make that all work, right? I forget what the numbers are, but last time I looked, and it's been a while, there were over 250,000 lines of PowerShell making that work. Now, not the best PowerShell, but there's lots of it. So it's unfortunate. It's very strange that I've got a team of people and they don't like, hey, excuse me, you invented this thing. How do you do this? It's just like, well, they just muscle through. And that's sort of okay. You know, that's sort of the thing. We're all on a journey. Anyway, so tonight, this is our only slide, and it's not correct. There's no workshop here. And it's,
Duh.
You want to edit that?
That's what happens when you reuse stuff.
We reuse things, yes. So we just thought, we probably have a bunch of Q&A, right? But I kind of tee up some things. And in particular, I'm really excited about, so part of my role as architect is to kind of step back and take a look at things, right? Architects are the guardians of the future, right? So that's my job, right? And the difference between an engineer and an architect, engineers get the job done today. Architects get the job done today in preparation for tomorrow and years down the line. So I spend a lot of time trying to look at where things are going and therefore what's important, and always be clear about urgent versus important. Anyway, so right now I think this is by far, and you always hear this, right? This is the most exciting time in the industry. I've said that I don't know how many times. This time really is different. No, I'll explain why, and you can agree or disagree, but let me explain why. So in the past, we are an industry of change, right? IT, computing, it's always change, and you got Moore's Law, right? And driving all that great stuff, and you've seen all the slides. But the reality is this. The reality is that the basic structure and form of computing was relatively fixed at any given point in time, and then something interesting would be happening. There'd be a revolution somewhere. And that would come about, not very frequently, but a big change would come about, and it would take us a while to digest, and then we digest it, and then go back to relatively static view of the world. Advancing, but relatively static. And what makes this time in the industry so different is the deep and fundamental rethinking of the basic architecture and design of the entire stack, done by different people at different paces at different times. Everything's up for grabs, everything. The silicon, up for grabs. The system design, up for grabs. The memory architecture and the memory models, up for grabs. Rack architectures, system architectures, rack architectures, the interconnect of these components, both internally and externally, incredibly creative stuff. Storage architectures, dramatic transformation. Network infrastructures, dramatic transformation. Applications, oh my God, application space, you just can't swing a dead cat without hitting a new thing, including languages. Now, some of these things, like languages, are an example where I think, is an example where, there's just, in my opinion, too much innovation. I don't think it's going to last, right? You just can't swing a cat without a new, there's Swift and Go and Rust and Erlang and OCaml and nose hair and earwax and just good Lord. And so here's the thing, right? So at some level, I just think there's all this great innovation. Innovation that matters, innovation that stays, is innovation that drives economic things, right? Substantial economic things. So here's your acid test, right? Here's your acid test, right? Is Erlang or Scala. My buddy's into Scala. I said, oh my God, that's great. He was telling me how wonderful it is. I said, but okay, so now fast forward 4 years. You're going to say, I am a Scala expert. Who the hell's going to hire you, right? Like how many people are currently hiring Scala people? No hands. Okay, Erlang people? No hand. Rust? That's very, okay, right. Like, so at some point, at Digital, we had these great domain-specific language. I used to work for Digital, and there was this one. What was it? Koala. Koala was a domain-specific language. It was great for word processing. And with this, you could do amazing stuff. Anyway, so I was an Ultrix development manager. I'm trying to hire some people, and I'm looking at these resumes, right? And I see C++, yep, talk to that guy. C++, talk to that guy. COBOL, yep, not interested. 6 years experts in Koala. I'm like, I'm not even gonna talk to this guy. Like, why would I talk to him? Right? I mean, I got these that I know they're gonna fit in this. Like, I don't know, the guy might have been the best engineer in the world. I didn't hire him, and I wouldn't hire him. So the point of that backstopping is some of these areas, I think there's a little bit too much innovation, and you'll see that settle down. It'll take a while. I don't know who the winners will be. I think the fact that you see such diversity is a reflection that the languages that we had weren't meeting the needs, okay? And I think the needs are there, and so then the question is, well, how will they respond? The other languages, existing languages are responding. Maybe they'll respond and maintain themselves. Maybe new winners will emerge, but I can guarantee you that the number of languages will dwindle at some point, just has to. And by the way, you can go back and just see this, right? Anybody hiring Forth programmers? Remember Forth? I loved Forth, man. That thing was mumps. Oh, come on. Don't laugh at mumps. You were looking at you were looking at a world's mumps expert here. That is not a joke. I am a world's mumps expert. I wrote, in fact, the world's first and only mumps compiler. Turns out you can't write a mumps compiler. So, but I wrote one, and I didn't know you couldn't do that until I did it. Turns out that the BNF is completely not regular, and so you had like compiled code with jumps to interpretive code to do it. Anyway, so no, mumps die. So a lot of things at some point have some purchase in the marketplace, and then they just die and become irrelevant. By the way, they never really die. In fact, if someone here would say, hey, no, mumps is actually fairly active in hospitals. It's like, well, hospitals that have been updated for the last 20 years, but it turns out there's a fair number of them. So things never really die, but they're just more or less relevant. So back to the point. Every single layer of the technology stack is changing in deep and fundamental ways. And in the past, as I said, we grow and it was a revolution, but you could predict. You're like, okay, so there's crazy stuff's going on in networking, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, here's how that's going to end up, and here's what the result is. This is happening at all layers of the stack, and the reason why this is interesting is that they're going to interact. And they're going to interact in ways that we cannot predict, and therefore produce meaningful results in ways that are impossible to predict. Now, let me just give you one example that now in hindsight, we can look and we can say, oh, that's it. Anybody heard of this thing called microservices? Microservices, pretty cool thing, right? I am very bullish on microservices. Now, why do we have microservices? And the answer is this: networking. Networking got sufficiently fast, high speed, high bandwidth, low latency, that now all of a sudden, things that I used to do with DLLs, with libraries, now I could do with protocols. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, here's the answer. So, by the way, I got this as I gave myself the space and time to ask some deep, stupid questions, right? So there I was, lead architect of Windows Server. We're in the middle of our 3-year release cycle. We plan for a year, we code for a year, and then we stabilize, test, and solidify before we release it for another year. And I'm doing that, and my buddy, Mark Rosinovich, is talking about, oh, Azure, and I'm releasing every day, I'm releasing 100 times a day, da-da-da-da. I'm thinking, wait a second. How is it that I'm sitting here And I can't get any new features. Like, hey, can I add this? No, we're shut down. Okay, well, when's my next opportunity to add this feature? Well, we're gonna finish this for a year, and then we'll do another year of planning, and so then we'll do this, and then, 4 years from now, it's like, hey, what? How is this working again? And I'm sitting there very frustrated I can't drive innovation faster. Well, all of a sudden, Mark's there like, oh, I just released another version of Azure, and another one. It's like, well, how can he do that? Then, I mean, he's just better than I am. And some people would argue that. He'd argue that. He's wrong. He's wrong. Just want that for the record. It's on camera, right? Mark is not smarter than me. Just want that to be super clear. Not admitting that in the least. But I realized, and so I thought, well, maybe it's all bullshit, right? Maybe it's bullshit. Maybe he's breaking things right, left, and center. And when I drilled into it, there's a little bit of that, right? These folks who do have these microservices, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, they do break people fairly often, but not so much as we do. And so I said, okay, well, what's going on here? And as I did the deep rethink, what I realized was it was all about environmental coupling. So what's that mean? So as an operating system architect, I deliver services to you that are typically consumed in the form of a DLL, a library, right? I load this into your process space, you call an API, and then you get services. Now, sometimes that library talks to a service on the same machine, but basically there's tight, intimate coupling between our components, right? When you load something into your address space, that's like sharing body fluids. That is a very intimate relationship, okay? And any change, like anything that's bad, you got it, okay? So, as much as we try and have these firm contracts and to not break compatibility, because we're in the same address space, something always goes wrong, right? And it's as simple as, well, hey, get out of the address space, then things get a little bit more robust. Not really, because we share the same environment. One of the worst encounters I've ever had in my career was doing a demonstration in front of this huge audience of people. We're supposed to go through this, like, okay, it's a bake-off, right? Enterprise management tool bake-off. Okay, here's a scenario. Do it with your tool. Then they do it with their tools. And I got up there, and nothing worked. Nothing. Absolutely zero worked. And I could see the glee on my competitors, like, it was just horrible. And what had happened was, we can swear, right? Some asshole came in and late at night and brought his floppy and inserted his copy of MSV CRT 4.1. Remember that thing? So guess what? His demo worked, and everything else failed. Everything failed, okay? But he wasn't up there, I was up there. So the point is, we have environmental coupling, okay? Now, we're just completely separate processes, but he brings his DLL in, and it's a different version, and now it breaks everyone else. So this environmental coupling, now with a microservice, with these Twitter, Azure, AWS, they offer these things not as DLLs, not as libraries, but rather as protocols. Now, as a protocol, I talk to that thing and I get a service. And at the other end of that protocol, I don't care what you're doing. You can implement that in C, C++, C#, Java, mumps, Erlang, earwax, I don't care. You can have one, you can run it on a big machine, you can run it on a small machine. You can do whatever you want. If you want to have a software load balancer there, talk to 2 machines, talk to 2,000 machines. I don't really care, right? Whereas with the library, if it turns out the library needs a larger machine, you got to run on that larger machine. Here, when I'm talking to a microservice, if it needs to scale, it scales, and I don't care about it, okay? Additionally, if that thing's run in Linux, you can convert it to run Windows, or vice versa. It's a contract. And by the way, the other thing is, and it shouldn't be this way, but here's just reality. Reality is that programmers don't treat DLL library contracts with the same formalism that they do a protocol. Everyone knows when you're dealing with the protocol, you have to be more formal, and they are. So anyway, because of this environmental decoupling, because we have this environmental decoupling, this area is able to innovate very, very rapidly and not break applications. Now, how did we get there? What the hell is he talking about? This was all really possible because of the increase in networking. So what do? We replaced DLLs, as about as low latency as you can get, high bandwidth, with a protocol. How's that going to work? And the answer is because the networking got fast enough, low enough latency, that became feasible. Okay? Now, you also change the abstraction a little bit, but now all of a sudden that's feasible. So my point is that, hey, a change in networking dramatically transformed application design. Okay, that's just one example. You are going to see, as these multiple layers of the stack have these transformations, you're going to see unpredictable interactions like that happen over and over and over again. So, put your seatbelts on. This is really part of the most amazing time. Now, the thing that gets me most jazzed is this idea of digital transformation, okay? And this is where turn point. So digital transformation, a lot of people say, oh, the cloud changes everything. Yeah, true, but that's a very technology-oriented thing. And the other way to say it, and the way I like to say it, is digital transformation changes everything. So the question is, well, what is digital transformation? Now, I was just talking to my buddy, where is he? I guess he left. The DevOps, right? A lot of talk about DevOps. I think DevOps, oh, there he is. I think DevOps is a little bit not quite right. Not quite right. So what do I mean by that? I think DevOps is very focused in on a set of things that ultimately allow you to go faster. And how many people are very familiar with DevOps? Okay, here, if you're not, here's the heart of DevOps. There's lots of discussions about what DevOps is, what it isn't. Here's the heart of DevOps. 1, do things in small batches. 2, stop being an asshole to your fellow workers. That's the heart of, is that reasonable? That's the heart of DevOps.
For years, we've been battling this, and that's what we should have started with leadership, was just don't be an asshole.
Yeah, don't be a dick. Stop being a dick and do things in smaller batches, okay? But no, truly, that is the heart of DevOps. It is. It's recorded, right? Okay. Warning. Send your children out. Okay, so, but here's the thing. That allows you to go faster, but it might mean that you're going faster producing stuff that nobody cares about, okay? So to me, what matters is digital transformation. Now, my definition of digital transformation, now you'll hear the marketing people, blah, 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 blah. Look, it's very, very simple. Digital transformation says you put the customer at the center of everything, and you have the courage and the willingness to refactor everything to maximize for delighting your customer. That's simple. That's simple. Now, when you pull on that thread, guess what? You got to do DevOps. My point is, when you pull on the DevOps thread, you might not pull on the customer thread. And that's why I know, like I do a lot of DevOps conferences, I'm going to be happy when I go to a DevOps conference and there's a series of talks like how to talk to customers to find out what they want versus they think they want. How do you go, get a true signal? What's the difference between a customer and a market, right? These are very important things, okay? And they generally are not conversations in DevOps. They are critical conversations in digital transformation. Now, how does this relate to technology and you and your careers? And here's the big message. I think that we are at the largest inflection point we've ever had in the industry, and it's around this digital transformation. And basically, whenever there's an inflection in the industry, you have new winners and you have new losers. Now, a lot of times, those people don't realize that they're losers. I'll just be clear. They don't realize it, right? The guys who are still managing mainframes, they don't think of themselves as losers, right? They're having a wonderful job. They love their work. They love their technology. It's just that the opportunities are smaller than they used to be, okay? And the same thing's going to happen. People aren't going to sit there and say, hey, you're a loser. But all of a sudden, year after year, there'll be less opportunities. There are other people that younger people coming up and making a ton more money than them. And they'll turn into those grouchy people, like damn hipsters. But there will be new winners. And the key is to become one of those new winners. So how do you do that? And the answer is, you got to see the trends, you got to see where it's going, and you got to get all in, okay? Now, and by the way, that's what happened to me. My career is doing great. I was a Unix development manager for many years, having a blast. But I saw this NT thing, and I saw that this was going to be an inflection point. I jumped all in, became the company expert at NT, led a few projects. My career skyrocketed from there. Okay, so jump all in on these inflection points. So here is the big thing. Maybe I'll motivate this with an example. Every year, Microsoft hires a ton of interns, right? These interns come in, they spend somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks, sometimes 12, and they do projects, right? And it's sort of a college recruiting thing. You know, give them a feel for what it's like, put some coin in their pockets, have a good time. They meet Bill and all that stuff. But at the end of their internship, they give a demo. And this year, oh my gosh, people were just raving about the interns. Like, it's as though people had put something in the water, that these interns were somehow special and unique and unlike all the other interns that we had before. Because each of these interns, the teams would come up and they'd say, I'm Joe from this college, and here's my project. And we'd look and we'd like, oh my God. And then like, okay, well, what's the status of this? And they said, well, it's in production right now, like literally in production. It's like an intern, 8 weeks, that amazing feature in production? Yeah, next one, same thing. Next one, same thing. And we're sitting there, these execs are sitting there like, what the heck? This is just amazing. And so the thought had been somehow like, oh my gosh, you know, computer science programs have really gotten good. I was dissatisfied with that explanation. And as I thought about it, I realized that they might be great, they're very great people, but I don't think they're that they're substantially different than the people we've been getting every year. But here's what was different. You know, 10 plus years ago, we get the same quality of people, and we come in and we say, hey, welcome to Microsoft. Let's do a project. Here's a C++ compiler. Here's a string class. Let's see what you can do in 10 weeks, right? And they come back and they say, I can sort an array. I say, okay, okay. How'd you like the food? You know, because you couldn't do that much when you have a string class and a compiler, right? But these people, when they come in, what we do is we say, hey, here is Azure. You know, got a couple million cores. Here are these amazing libraries. Here are these amazing repositories. Here is an artificial intelligence microservice. You just give your stuff to it, and it produces these machine learning things, and then you just call it. And they were able to leverage these things to produce spectacular results with real business impact. I mean, honestly, execs were like, maybe we should just fire all those idiots we had and hire these guys. I mean, they could and so here's my joke, but there's a seed of truth to it. And the joke is this. Nobody cares about your first million lines of code, right? If you're going to do something substantial, you know, whatever the number is, there's some huge amount of code that you need to write that really doesn't do much. But that once you have it, you have the ability to then write small amounts of code, 50, 100, 500 lines of code, to tie it all together to then really show all the potential of that million lines of code. So the joke is, never quit a project when you got 990,000 lines of code written, right? Because then the next person comes in, finishes that, and then writes 500 lines of code and wows everyone. And they're like, wow, I'm so glad we hired you. We were paying these idiots for years, and they did nothing. You guys rock. Oh my God, what jerks they were, you know? And so that's what's happening in the industry. That as an industry, we're getting to this sort of theoretical million lines of code. This amount of code where there's substantial enough architecture, substantial enough services that people are able to come in and write small amounts of code and have disproportionate business results. Now, here's the downside. The downside is that means that there's a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't matter anymore. And most of us are spending our time on that stuff, okay? So now I'm going to switch and talk about kind of the theoretical basis for this digital transformation. Geoffrey Moore, here's my joke, right? You all know about Moore's Law, yeah? Foundation of our industry. There's what I call the other Moore's Law, and this is Geoffrey Moore, right, with a G. And I believe that The other Moore's Law is going to be more important to our industry for the next 20 years than the original Moore's Law. Quite serious about that. What Moore said was every business participates in two things, what he called core activities. A core activity is something you invest in because it delivers customer value that you can charge a premium for, and then everything else, okay? An example, Microsoft, our core is software. So we scour the world for the world's best software people, we treat them really well, and that's what we do. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that we do that we need to do as part of our business, right? We have to have cafeterias, we have to have receptionists, we have to have shuttles, right? We have no technical fellows of the cafeterias, no distinguished engineers of the shuttles, right? No vice presidents of the cafeterias. Right? So there, we just want to write a check. We want good service. We want very good service, but Satya and his leadership team does not spend any time at all talking about what we should put on the menus, right? Just want to write a check and forget about it so we can focus all of our energy on this. And here's what I'm here to tell you. We're getting to the stage in the industry where people can spend more of their percentage of employees and attention on the stuff that drives customer value than the other stuff. So let me be concrete. And by the way, and the ones that do are going to have such disproportionate value, they're going to kick the ass of everybody else, right? Now you think, well, maybe. Is that really true? What the hell is that application that Facebook bought? Was it WhatsApp?
Something like
Or
that.
Snap? Anyway, one of these things, it was like $17 billion. You know what I'm talking about? WhatsApp? Okay. You know how many employees they had?
He was actually interviewed for Microsoft, actually, it was not hired.
There you go. Don't know what to make of that. So yeah, I think there was like 50 employees. 50 employees and produced something that then was purchased for like $17 billion. And why? And the answer is they had figured out how to use cloud technologies and other people's data centers to do this massive amplification. $17 billion. And you say, well, that's a one-off. I say there's more of these coming, many more of these coming. Okay? And so that I think is sort of the heart, is how do you focus in on these things? Now, what things don't matter? Anybody running their own exchange? Here's a question. Here's the question. Ask yourself the hard question. Hey, are you going to sell more, if you're in the business, airplane business, can you sell more airplane seats or sell more sneakers or sell more anything by running your own exchange server? Let's say you had the best exchange service in the world. Any more people in an airplane? Answer, no. If Microsoft spent billions of dollars on our cafeterias, I don't think you'd be using our Azure over AWS, right? It's something that might make everybody happy. Oh, this food's wonderful. But it doesn't change the business reality. There's a ton of what I call commodity workloads that fall into this category, right? That we are spending tons of time on that don't drive the business forward. And if you're in that spot, I suggest you get out of that spot. That's not where you want to be, right? So for these things, there are great SaaS offerings, right? Go get Office 365. Just write a check. Like, hey, you do that. But here's the thing. No, it's digital transformation. Like, I'm going to step back, sorry, and I'll come back to this. Digital transformation. So you come to this talk, you hear about digital transformation, you say, I got it. That's what we got to do. Hey, boss, we got to do digital transformation. He says, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. What do we need to do? I need to double my engineering staff, right? Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So here's the trick. Now, a lot of these startup companies don't have any legacy. So they're able to do digital transformation with their entirety of their staff. So how do you compete against that? And the answer is the successful people will be the ones that figure out how to create bandwidth to pursue digital transformation. You got to create the bandwidth. You're not going to get new heads to do it. So how do you create bandwidth? Step number one, these commodity workloads that do not help move your business forward, just write a check for it. Might be expensive, might not be. Typically it's less than you think, but just write a check. And that frees you up. What do you then do? And I assert the next step is lift and shift, right? take existing workloads and lift them and shift them into an IaaS, right? Whether it's on-premise IaaS or cloud, AWS, Azure, Google, whoever, just do a lift and shift. And these cloud platforms deliver so much extra value in terms of being able to resize, extra value in terms of built-in management, et cetera, that just lifting it and shifting it will again create more bandwidth for you. Next thing you do is you lift and modernize, right? What's lift and modernize? Well, if you can take an application and put it in a container, guess what? Again, your costs go down, your agility goes up, you create more bandwidth. And by these three things, SaaS, just buy commodity workloads. 2, lift and shift. And then 3, lift and modernize. You will create a ton of bandwidth. And you can take that old stuff and just say, I'm not paying any attention to it. Now I'm going to focus here. And here is these new architectures, cloud-based architectures, where you're using an AI service. Wait, an AI service? Yeah, you can have a gazillion cores doing this AI engine for you, and then you just call it. But, true story. So I'm in the speaker lounge at Ignite 2 weeks ago, and with Rasinovich getting ready for our talk, and this guy comes over. He says, "Hey, have you seen these guys' demos?" I said, "No, what's that?" And these 2 PMs, product managers, right, not developers, and what they had done was they used this machine learning service in Azure to put up all these videos, and somehow they're modeling something, and it produced this machine learning model that then they downloaded and were running on premise on a very small machine, and you were able to take video feeds, and it could recognize, oh, this is a person or this and this. All the learning had been done up there. You get the model, run it here, and it was highly efficient. I said, wow, how long have they been working on that? He said, no, they just started. I mean, they did it like in the middle of the week, and now they have it running. And these are a bunch of PMs. That is incredible. I mean, that is leverage, okay? Now, these guys are limited only by their imagination. So this is the heart of the message, right? That you got to free up bandwidth to focus in on the things that matter, and the things that matter are the things that drive customer value. So that's kind of the heart of it. That was the kind of message I wanted to say. And then let's have some Q&A. Jason in here.
Let me give you a couple of concrete examples off of him, and
please.
then we'll do that.
Yeah, you were supposed to interrupt along the line, right?
Yeah, but you know, you were on a roll.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Let me give you a couple of things, okay, to kind of take this digital transformation idea and make it a little bit more concrete. How many of you, go ahead and answer this, honestly. How many of you still have some 2003 servers? Okay. Do you know that that's bad? Do you know how bad? As in giant hole in your security model. Yeah. So here's the thing. At some point in time, you've got to take responsibility for what's wrong, fix it so you can get the bandwidth. He's talking about getting bandwidth. How can you get bandwidth? How many of you are currently Exchange people? It's okay. I used to be an Exchange person. Used to be. That career's over.
There's a 12-step program to help you.
I have a question. How many Gmail servers do you have in your environment? Think about that for a minute. Tell that to your boss. Sorry, we've replaced this now. You're wasting time, money, and effort managing something that is not useful to the business moving forward. So let me take these things of 2003, products you don't need anymore. Well, I shouldn't say don't need. You need that service, but you don't need to be managing that product. You just haven't figured out how to get rid of it. I did. My career's a lot different because I figured it out. He was saying, people, you got to figure this out. Because nobody's going to do it for you, especially all this legacy stuff. Let me give you a very unfortunate example. Then I'll give you a positive one. The unfortunate example is I worked with a customer, and I was at a conference. I just have to say, I was at a conference, I was speaking at a conference, and a guy got up. I was talking about desired state configuration management, pipeline. Guy gets up, and he's brave. I appreciate the fact that he was brave enough to stand up and go, this is crap because my company's never going to do this. I'm like, oh, okay. What he didn't know is that I've already been working with his company's leadership team. They are doing it. Do you know what the disconnect he has? They don't want him to do it because he didn't know what he's talking about. And so he's like, I can make the decision for my company and its ability to compete against competitors. They'll never do this. No, they're gonna do it. They're doing it right now. They're not using you because you're a moron. You're unclear. You don't know what's happening in technology. You don't know what's going on. So they're not talking to you. Here's actually what their problem is. They have 35 guys just like him. Old Windows guys, and you know these people. Yeah, I see you shaking your heads. Don't be.
Next,
This-
next, next.
So they have 35 guys, and they need DevOps pipeline, they need configuration management, they have commerce products they're trying to get out, they need their applications to be agile, they need this features that sit on a shelf for a year, cost money, they're not helping the customer. They need this stuff out, they need to compete. Well, who knows how to do configuration management? Who knows all of this DevOps stuff? Well, not our 35 old-fashioned Windows guys. And I was sitting there with the CFO and the rest of the leadership team going, hey, I'm a guy that loves to train, so we could try training him. And he's sitting there with a calculator. And he's sitting there with a calculator going, let's see, cost of training? How long will it take him to become an expert at this so that we can actually do this? Oh, maybe 3 years. That's an unacceptable number. Yeah? Well, there's another option. What's that? Hire a Linux guy? They did. They hired 4 of them and got rid of 35 Windows guys. The Linux guys, they didn't go to Linux. They're still using Windows. The Linux guys know PowerShell. They know automation. They've grown up with automation. This isn't something they had to learn. They were born with this, right? This is Linux. And they're going to do it to Windows because PowerShell can do it. They know DevOps. They know configuration management. They know Puppet and Chef and DSC. They know all of this stuff. They can walk in, hit the ground running, build this up, start making that company competitive. Here's my problem. I have no problems hiring Linux guys. But we have all these Windows guys that already know Windows, but they're not moving forward. They're not paying attention to the idea of you need to make space. So you have to cast off the stuff that no longer matters. And if you're saying, well, my boss won't let me do it, that's the part you have to figure out. That's the people that climb to the top. Let me give you a more positive example, and then we'll go to
Can I
Q&A.
highlight
Oh,
that?
yeah.
So the schema there was basically that change was required. People need to learn things to be successful. And what that company did was they decided that it was going to be harder for the Windows team to learn DevOps than to take DevOps people and have them learn Windows. That's what happened. It's not that they hired these Linux guys and said, right, we're rewriting everything in Linux. It's like, no, you guys got Linux, apply that skill set to this Windows world. And they felt that that was cheaper to do.
Let me give you a positive personal example. I like to work with people and help them whenever I can. That's my thing. And we have a friend whose name is Missy, who was an Active Directory engineer, the enterprise Active Directory engineer for a very large company. She automated her stuff with PowerShell, yeah. However, was going nowhere after 20 years and decided she could not get her company to move on anything. Not a pipeline, not their applications, not configuration management, no matter how many demos. So she took her career into her own hands. In other words, if my company's not going to go in the right direction, let me just throw out this rule because I was helping her, mentoring her at the time, and I have this rule. My career has never been decided by the company I've worked for. It's always been decided by me. And she swore up and down, I will never leave. I will never leave the soft, warm shit of the company that I'm in and go out into the cold, cruel world. I will never, and then about 5 months into this, she did. She left to be on her own. So she started writing, she started doing conferences, she started creating things that other people hadn't created with configuration management and stuff like that. She earns a really good living doing it, and she is coming up as in the top of the field for this. Puppet, Chef, doesn't matter. It's DevOps, it's configuration management, it's making things immutable, it's getting rid of snowflakes. We can do this, we know how to do this. You want to talk to me about Exchange? she'll be the first one to say, you wanna talk about exchange? No, make the phone call to the sales engineer at 0365, because if you're doing anything else, you're wasting time. She changed her career in less than 6 months. Went from I will never leave to I am now a configuration goddess and I'm out of there. So on a personal side, and I know, and she was one of the first people that yelled at me in a conference saying, you saying just leave your company is bullshit. She's also from Philly, so it scared me. Because when she says bullshit, and it just comes out really, you know. But the point is I know it sounds like crap, but if your company won't change, and you have changed, and you are changing, then go find a company that is changing, one that wants to be competitive.
What's Don's phrase for this? Don Jones has a phrase, he says, nope, that's his. He said, Don's is change your company or change your company.
Yeah. Change your company or change your company. Yeah, that's Don's, yeah. So,
I like that one.
but you of all people, skills at PowerShell, you've seen automation take off.
Yeah, by the way, can I just say, I'm a dope. So I was talking about creating bandwidth. The best way to create bandwidth is through automation, right? So yes, SaaS, yeah, but automation, yeah.
Little product you invented?
Yeah, yeah, this is what they call burying the lead. No, it's automation, by the way, and so that does two things. One is automation creates bandwidth and improves the quality of the stuff that's going on, so you can do other stuff. And guess what? The stuff that you're gonna do, boy, if that's not automated, you're not doing it right at all. All this stuff is automated, right? It's not to say that there aren't people, there are people, but these are people who are automating, measuring, refining the automation, doing it over and over and over again.
So when you guys say to go back to the office tomorrow, and you're sitting there figuring out what fires do I need to put out, you need to ask yourself something. Am I putting out a fire that is a fire that I shouldn't even have? I shouldn't have even had to deal with. And if so, you need to make that change. In other words, you need to work on the things that matter the most to your business and pushing that business forward. And here's the thing, you're not doing this alone. How many of you have gone to PowerShell.org's website? How many have gone to the forums and posted a question? How many of you use Twitter and post questions to #PowerShell? Get involved in the community, because here's the thing, was PowerShell easy to learn? Okay, if
We watched
okay,
the video.
if you sit there and shake your head yes, I'm gonna call you a liar, because PowerShell was not easy to learn.
No, it was. I watched your 4 hours worth of.
Oh, okay, well, if it was due to us, then yes, it was easy.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you. If you came to the right source, piece of cake.
It was very good. It was 8 hours, so you did it in 4. That's
Yeah, double speed, right? So here's the thing, you're not alone. You have people, me, Don, other people in this community that know how hard this is, that want to help other people achieve the right results. So get involved with the community, share what you're dealing with, get advice. You don't have to always take it, but pay attention to what's going on in technology and the digital transformation so that you aren't caught behind. You already made the investment in PowerShell. Keep it going forward so that you don't lose the investment. Cloud technologies, my company will never go to the cloud. You might be really surprised, especially if your confidential data that can't go public cloud can be on-prem. Understand? Thank you very much. So that you can still get all those cloud features on-prem. There are no more excuses other than the typical political ones.
Hey, can I ask you, are you connected on the internet here? What's
I
that?
don't think so.
No, okay, so here's the thing. What's that? That's okay, I'll teach you something to search for, and then you search for it. So at Ignite, so at some point you might be sitting there saying, that's great, but I don't own that decision. This guy over here owns that decision, and we need to influence him. And boy, I wish he was sitting here, because then this is exactly what he needs to hear. But I want to show him this videotape because Jeffrey swears a lot. So there is a talk that I just gave at Ignite that lays this out. Is actually one of the highest ranked talks of the whole conference, and it was called Digital Transformation. Actually, in the catalog, it might have been called Data Center Transformation, but it is a roadmap for people, processes, and platforms. So basically, it lays out this whole idea about the theory for digital transformation, the strategies for creating bandwidth, and then talking about how you are 3 different streams: people, processes, DevOps, and platforms, IaaS to PaaS, and sort of a step-by-step. First do this, then do this, then do this. I think it's a very good talk, but especially the first 20 minutes on this theory of digital transformation. I encourage you to look it up and send it to your decision makers.
Was it the same one that you tweeted? I think it was today or something.
I tweet a lot of them. No, today I talked about security. So yeah, that was actually the second ranked talk of the entire session. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, there was a great one on security.
We're gonna open up for Q&A.
Yeah.
But somebody made me a bet. So, let's see here. Watch. You guys know this. Yeah? Yeah. Pretty simple.
Yeah,
Yeah?
yeah,
Syntax?
yeah.
Is that a parameter or an argument?
It's a parameter.
How do you know?
What?
How do you know it's a parameter?
Because I invented it.
Well, here's the thing. When you're at a bar and you're going to whip something out, you cannot do it at the table with him because it's always going to be wrong. So, do you guys know that that's a parameter? How do you know it's a parameter? It's got a dash in it. This is an argument. How do you know it's an argument?
What's the proper pronunciation for that right here?
For these?
Yes.
What is the proper pronunciation of these? These are chihuahuas. That was the bet.
Chihuahuas?
Not chihuahuas.
It's not.
That was the bet. See if we can say chihuahuas. Because we did that today.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Other than that, go ahead and open up for Q&A. Hey, do you guys know that PowerShell 6
Oh, yeah.
runs on Linux? Yeah? Is that kind of cool?
Yeah, by the way, so why would we do this? Why would we do this? There's really 2 answers. First was new leader. Boy, you hear all this stuff? It's the real deal. It's the real deal, not BS. And basically we came in and he said, hey, I want you all to get out of your offices. Stop talking to one another. Go talk to the customers. Figure out what they need to be successful and give it to them. He says, don't worry about money. If you're making people successful, we have smart people that will figure out how to monetize it. If our customers aren't being successful, that's really hard to monetize, okay? So go out and give it to them. So when we did that, we talked to people, everyone is heterogeneous. Everybody wants to be heterogeneous. Some are largely Windows and have some Linux. Some are largely Linux and have some Windows, right? So I don't know if you know, I was just at a conference and a Windows DevOps conference in London called WinOps, and there's a talk given by Facebook about automating all their Windows stuff. I was like, Facebook has Windows? He said, oh yeah, we got tons of Windows. I said, I didn't know that. I know Google has tons of Windows, right? They love PowerShell. In fact, they come to our conferences. Anyway, so everybody has things. And the problem has been that you got the Windows team and you got the Linux team. And what people want is the team. Now in the past, you just haven't been able to have a tool that works in both spaces. Now you can say, well, now you can use PowerShell or Bash. And the answer is not really. You can really only use PowerShell to manage both environments. And the reason for it is this, that originally I tried to take the original origin of PowerShell was I didn't want to invent anything, right? I wanted to like solve this problem and move on to something else. So I got these Windows or Unix utilities and made available on Windows, and it didn't work. Like nothing worked. Nothing worked. Now let's be clear. Ockrep said it all worked, but you couldn't manage anything with them. And why? And the answer is there is a core architectural difference between Linux and Windows, Unix and Windows. In Unix, Linux, everything is an ASCII text file. And if you can edit a file and you can restart a process, you can manage everything on Linux. right? That's why awk, string manipulation, sed, string manipulation, grep, string manipulation, these are management tools. But you bring those tools to Windows and they don't work because nothing is file-based in Windows, or very few things are file-based, right? So grep doesn't work against the registry. Awk doesn't work against WMI. Sed doesn't work against Active Directory. So it wasn't helpful at all. So we had to invent PowerShell, an API-oriented system that could invoke APIs and get objects and manipulate those objects, okay? So that world, you need that to manage Windows. Having Bash on Windows doesn't solve that core problem. The problem it does solve is you go to the Valley and you see a ton of people with these machines writing server code for back-end Linux machines. And why? And the answer is it's pretty easy, natural way to develop open source software and then run it on a Linux machine. Except guess what? The value proposition of this hardware is horrible, right? They haven't invested, they've been terrible to the users, they don't keep up to date, they're lame machines, and Windows has this amazing ecosystem. I mean, you can get a Windows box, right? I don't know if you've seen this Lenovo P51. Oh my God, this thing, you can have 64 gigabytes of RAM. 64 gigabytes of RAM. You can have like 3 SSDs in this thing. You get amazing hardware. And the Surface Books, there's a bunch of great hardware. And now with WSL on there, now if you're developing against a back-end Linux box, now the PC is a viable place to do that. That's what that's all about. But having Bash on Windows none of that helps you manage Active Directory.
He didn't mean it, baby.
He did. None of that helps you manage any of Windows. So you need PowerShell for that. But people wanted to have one tool to manage everything. So we took PowerShell, made it available on Linux, and now we can manage everything. Now here's the other secret. I love to point this out because the Linux guys just go like, oh, he's right. And that is day by day, release by release, Linux is becoming more like Windows. The Linux people freak out like, oh, it's like, it's true. So what did I say the core architectural difference was? ASCII text files versus APIs returning structured objects. And you just have to observe the Linux community and realize that more and more things are being surfaced through APIs. We call them REST endpoints. And what do they return? Structured objects. We call them JSON documents. So it is true that day by day, Linux is becoming more like Windows. Well, guess what? A great tool for managing Windows, PowerShell, that can call APIs and manipulate objects, structured objects, deals with that world really well. And it's just another shell, so it can call awk, grep, sed, etc. So that's why we did this work. And what it really means is that as skilled in PowerShell, now all of a sudden you can manage more things. Remember back to that idea of like, hey, it's easier for people to learn a new operating system than to learn new techniques and new tools, right? So instead of being replaced by the Linux guys who get this stuff, now you can replace the Linux guys because you've got the tools that can manage everything. So that's sort of the heart of this, why we did it.
I don't know if you realize this, but a couple hours of structured learning on how Linux operates, you're good. How's that for a career boost? I can do both. He can only do one. So, ask questions, guys. Anything. It's an ask anything. Oh, you want to know how many ties he has? I do.
How many ties do I have? I haven't counted.
Do you have
Probably
a special closet for all those ties?
a place in the closet.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, 30, 50, a lot of ties. But I got my favorites. Sorry, you had a question. They don't care about my ties.
So obviously PowerShell 6 is very different than what we're sharing as C4 and 5.1. And we're bringing more into failness of different. And you told us at Ignite, you mentioned that we shouldn't worry about 5.1, it's good for 15 years. Can you talk more about that and how you kind of envision the two working together?
Yeah, so let's be clear about where we are. So 5.1 is really sort of the terminus for Windows PowerShell. Now, what does that mean? Windows PowerShell is based upon .NET, the full .NET. That is not cross-platform. So the .NET team, and really, honestly, this whole thing about Satya, here's the reality. PowerShell team was on that page about 15 years ago. really the rest of the company's catching up. We wanted to do this. In fact, I funded an effort that did not get off the ground to re-implement PowerShell in native code so that I could take it to Linux. That ended up not working out, but we were trying to do this for quite some time. But the .NET team wasn't. So when the .NET team got out and found out they love .NET, but they want to run on Linux, they ported, and in porting, they had to subset things, okay? And so they did this .NET Core, and that's the portable component. So we had to refactor PowerShell in order to run on .NET Core. So I got 2 code bases. Now, the one code base is cross-platform, runs on Windows and Linux. The other one only runs on Windows. So the position is that the one that only runs on Windows, we're sort of done with, and all the innovation will be focused in on this new version. Now, just to be clear, the new version doesn't do as much as the old version because it's a subset, okay? But that's a point-in-time conversation. We're going to invest, that's where we're going to put all the energy, and then we'll meet it and then go beyond that in subsequent releases. Now, some people heard this and reacted negatively, like, oh my God, what do you mean you're stopping PowerShell? Let's talk about that. Okay, anybody heard of this thing called command.exe, right? Okay, command.exe. PowerShell version 1 was approximately 10 to 10,000 times more powerful than command.exe. That's PowerShell version 1. Now, I will tell you that a lot of people might think you know PowerShell. I will tell you that most people know less than 50% of the features that we put into PowerShell. In fact, Jason,
Right, yeah.
you want to tell your story?
The PowerShell
Nouns?
V1 story?
Nouns?
The nouns? So, nouns. Oh, well, I had to remember, so. So, this is funny, because this happened today. I learned this today. The nouns, are they singular or plural?
No, not that
No,
one.
not that one, what?
No, the
Help me.
get, the optional get.
Do you know? Do you know that you can run a commandlet by its noun without its verb?
I do know because I watched this session tonight.
Okay, but had you not seen it at Ignite, how many of you know that you could just type in service and it would work? Here's the thing. I've been doing PowerShell since Monad, so 13 years, 12 years. And I never knew this. Do you know when it was put into the language? I think version 5.1.
Is actually version 0.51.
In other words, it was in when PowerShell 1 released and none of us realized, I mean none of us, I'm gonna check. But if he doesn't lie to me, I bet you Don Jones doesn't know. Jeff Hicks, Richard Sidaway, all of these guys, I don't know.
So the point here is that there's an incredible amount of capability in PowerShell 1.0, which was, again, 10 to 10,000 times more powerful than command.exe. Now, since then, we've added 4 additional releases. We're now on PowerShell version 5. We've added transactions. We've added XML processing. We've added remoting. We've added classes. We've added desired state configuration. We've added jobs management. We've added unit testing. We've added. And this is all in PowerShell 5.1. Now, I'm pretty comfortable with where we are with PowerShell version 5.1. I will tell you this. We have been trying to there has not been a single feature added to command.exe in the last 20 years. Because every time we touch that code base, we break the entire world. Not a single feature has been added, and we can't get rid of it because people are still using it everywhere. So, having said that, I'm very comfortable that 5.1 is going to meet everyone's needs fine if they want to stay on that code base. Now, again, Satya's leadership. Listen to your customers. If it turns out I'm wrong in my hypothesis, come talk to us and we'll revisit that. But I'm very confident that there is no need that you have that won't be met by what we have there or what's there that you don't know about. And so then, but the point is, any investments I make there doesn't help move forward this cross-platform world where you invest in something and then all of a sudden you can apply it to everything. Now, just to be clear, right? So this is what's so exciting. My friends at VMware, let that sink in for a second. My friends at VMware, right? And indeed, I do have friends at VMware. They are a great PowerShell partner. And they were one of the earliest and most active PowerShell communities. And they would come to me and they say, hey, can can we have a conversation? Yeah, what's up? He said, we have a problem with PowerShell. I said, great, man, I'd love to solve your problems. What's the problem? They said, well, here's the problem. It's awesome. I said, why is that a problem? He said, well, because my Linux users don't have that. And they think that they're getting a second-class automation experience, and in reality, they are. So that's a real problem for us. Can you help with that? And that's actually, yes, I'd love to. That's where I started some of this native code stuff, and it didn't work out. So they now are jumping on this. They love it, the Linux on PowerShell. So now they're able to invest in PowerShell and give that great automation experience to all of their customers, right? Launch partners for Linux PowerShell, VMware, AWS, Google. Now, is this a strange world? Okay, this is a strange world. So we're working with all those guys.
Give a comment back to your friends at VMworld. Tell them to preference their commandlets because it breaks the failover cluster. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. What is it break?
Friends they are.
Totally. What does it break?
Microsoft failover clustering commandlets.
Oh,
You
failover.
can't install PowerCLI if you have the clustering goal installed in the same box.
Ooh.
Because there's no-
Oh, that's interesting. I don't
That's
think I knew
horrible.
that.
That's interesting.
You should conundrum because if you're trying to manage everything from your workstation where you should and stay off the servers.
I'm not gonna have any of that.
No.
The other thing is, guys, keep in mind that PowerShell version 6 is actually version 1, right? Of that product. And so while people will say, well, it doesn't do
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
everything.
I just talked to them. They're gonna solve your problem. When you import the module, like say, instead of storage, it's a Hyper-V. Oh, let me see, make sure I do this
Prefix
right.
it.
You say prefix. What do you want them to put in front of it?
Anything?
VMW? VMW.
There you go.
Did it actually work?
Yeah, it did.
So now, I can say, get disk, yeah? And that gets me the disks. That looks horrible, but now, that called the one module, or I can say, get VMW disk. Calls that. So, what just happened there?
Prefix.
Since this idea of prefixing was there the very first time we shipped import module, which was 2, I think, or 3.
Yeah, because at the time, do you guys know that the Exchange team, their commandlets, they use get-user? Damn them. Who else wants to use get-user? This little tiny
Everyone.
directory service called AD. So we've always had this prefix issue going on. So that's why we use -prefix to solve it anytime we run against.
Well, yeah, and so the point is that when you import something, by the way, we actually did it in PowerShell version 2 because I first
Yeah.
added this to remoting. So you have this collision problem, and one thing to say, hey, here are the rules of the road, follow the rules of the road, and everything's gonna be fine. And it turns out we're very clear about that stuff, but when you give it to the bell curve of humanity, the top of the bell curve does really, really well, and the bottom of the bell curve is focused in on other things, let's just say. But I need to protect you and your experience. I take responsibility for that. So what we added was this prefixing and said, hey, they did the wrong thing. They should put VMW in front of stuff. I can help you. You input their stuff and you say minus prefix VMW, and it all gets mapped to that. And those are now the names. So you don't need them to fix it. You can fix it for them. By the way, that was part of the heart and soul of PowerShell is the following. The world always has been, the world is, and the world always will be messy. And it's one thing to say, hey, can't we all just get along, right? The Rodney King architecture. Let's just all get along. And the answer is it'll never happen because the world always has been messy because there's legacy stuff that you can never get rid of and is never going to be updated. The world is messy because there's disagreements about priorities, et cetera. And the world always will be messy because there's always innovation. And my job is to try and help you cope with that messy world. Try and provide some coherence to it, try and provide glue to it, et cetera. And so things like this minus prefix is one of the tools we bring in place for you to take something that they shouldn't have done that, but who cares? I'll fix it myself.
So does that work on install module then too? Like when you install a module?
I don't think so. I think it's only when you import it. Or if you do like, fan in, you can import it with a prefix, but I think it's only on import.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's look.
That might be a good thing to add.
Yeah, it's proxy. Yeah, there's no,
No, so it doesn't. But that's a great idea.
that's actually not a bad idea.
So, we can't show we're not connected.
My thought was like, well, that'll work, I can put it in a profile, just prefix their stuff, and then I still got my native failover clustering. But it would be very convenient if I just install it off of the online repository and prefix it there. And then I don't have to remember to update my profile and.
Great idea. So here's next step. Next step is, not only do we go cross-platform, we went open source, right? So a couple things about that. One is, my friend, grab your compiler and fix this problem, if you'd like.
So-
Or just,
So, wait a second. I just want to point something out. This is a very clear point, because you hear me and Don Jones, and obviously he's doing this too. So, could you please give us this feature? No, you go write the feature. That's what open source is.
not quite.
I know, but
You're
that's,
empowered to.
that's-
Like, if you have the skills and the desire,
You have
you
the
can go
ability.
add that. But if you don't, then all of our source code is up there, and our issues list, like, we're totally transparent. There's nothing off to the side. All the work that we're doing is all public. You can see exactly what we're doing, and you can file your own request for features right there, and have the community say, oh, that's a horrible idea, or that's an awesome idea. And then we use that backlog to fill things. But by the way, let me be clear. I think it is important to have the source code available, even if you don't change it, right? Sometimes you'll see a crappy error message, you're like, what the hell does that mean? And by searching the source code and seeing it, you can look at the code and get a better beat. Like, okay, I might not be able to write this code, but I can understand what it's doing. Like, oh, why did they say that? And here's the thing. It is very simple for you to go offer alternative error messages. And we did that at Ignite. Went in, said, hey, this is a crummy error message, let's change it. We just showed how using a web browser, just go in there, change the text, say, please do a pull request. Very simple to do. And so I encourage you to do that, particularly with error messages, because it's so easy to do. And then having done that, you're like, oh, hey, this other error message sucks too. Let's fix that, and let's fix that. And then you might say, hey, I'd love to add this commandlet's great, but it really needs this one switch, and that'd be pretty easy to do. And those are all great contributions, we don't need everybody to come in and change the, the dynamic language runtime parse trees. You don't have to do that. There's lots of ways to contribute.
but how cool is it to maybe contribute some code and get it pulled in, and the next release of PowerShell V6 whatever, or VNext, has some of your code in it?
Yeah, it's very
How
cool.
effing cool is that?
And by the way, just to be clear,
Microsoft that add more staff to their maintainers of the repositories that kind of they own, quote unquote, on GitHub. I find a lot of times just submit a pull request and it'll sit,
is that PowerShell or in general?
PowerShell, DSC.
Well,
DSC
you're talking about
community.
DSC resources,
Oh.
really, right?
Yeah? what's
Because
up with
there's a
that?
drag on the day. I live that life with the DSC resources, and there is a drag on that, and they have people that are trying to do their best. And I would agree that it'd be nice if they could increase their staff. I don't know if Microsoft can do
Okay,
that.
I'll look into that. I didn't know that.
But quite honestly, I know some of these people, they're working really hard. They're trying to get the pull requests through, and trust me, I have sent some, look, can you just tell me when you're gonna take the pull request? Because I have product that needs this. And it's just hard sometimes to get this stuff done, because they've got to go through and make sure this is all tested, you got Pester for this, and so,
This is great feedback.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, again, the Satya feedback, right? Go out and embrace the red, find out where we're screwing up, and then go fix that. So that's very helpful.
and
I
as
didn't
one
realize
helpful
that I had a
note, I find if you
problem there.
directly mail the person responsible for the repo, sometimes that helps, not always, but sometimes it does. It reminds them that, oh, there are change requests out there.
If you CC me, it turns out they handle it. Oh. Hey, Jeffrey, as we discussed,
You want something to happen fast and have them deliver a cup of coffee? CC, yeah.
This is one, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me talk about the meta issue here. So here here's where I had two hats on, right? I had my PowerShell hat on, and I also had the lead architect for Windows Server hat on. And what was happening was I looked out in the marketplace and I saw there was Chef and there was Puppet and there was Ansible and there was this and this and this. And it was a mess, right? And it was a mess because there's no architecture for configuration management in Windows. Okay, so now why is this a mess? And the answer is you're Chef, and so you gotta do everything yourself. You wanna configure SQL, you gotta write that. You wanna configure Exchange, you gotta write that. Your Puppet, you gotta do the same thing, except actually you got some better developers, so you're managing Exchange better, except he's managing SQL better. And then you're both looking at this saying, this ain't gonna work, because man, this is a big surface area. So you're both going and knocking on SQL saying, hey, you know what? I am the #1 configuration management tool in the world, and you need to write to me. And they're like, is that true? Maybe we should do that. And then this guy comes in and says, I'm the #1 configuration manager, and you need to write to me. It's like, wait a second, I gotta write, how many of you are in line? This is a goddamn mess, okay? And so what I said was, what's important is to fix that mess, to have an architecture, a platform architecture, where we take a stand as Windows to say, here's how you do configuration management on Windows and Windows Server. And it is desired state configuration. And with this, I, as Windows, am gonna go to the Exchange team and I'm gonna say, hey, write this. I'm gonna go to the SQL team, I'm gonna say, write this. I'm gonna go to VMware, I'm gonna say, write this. And they're all gonna write it one way. And then I'm gonna go to you guys and I'm gonna say, hey, stop bothering those people. They don't wanna hear from you. You code to this API and guess what? You'll get all this stuff. So now, one, there's uniformity. Like you stop messing around with that stuff. You're not messing around trying to get people to code to your stuff. We're doing that work for you. You just code to us and you get all that for free. Number two, as a customer, I can go to either one of you and know that you're going to be able to manage everything the same way. And then I'll say, okay, well, what features on top of that do you have? What reporting do you have? What's your user interface? What's your ecosystem like, right? But I'm not wondering about, hey, do you manage SQL better than he does? Like, that's a lousy conversation. You just take that for granted. If they support DSC, they support the configuration, anything that plugs into it to the same level. So that was the platform piece. Now, to be successful as a platform, we couldn't have a product in that space. If I was doing this and saying, and by the way, I was very clear, at some point we'll have a product in the space, right now we don't. So then when I go to Chef, I'm not saying, hey, come into a rigged game, but everybody's gonna pick me, but you should still, that isn't gonna work. So we basically focused in on the platform pieces. I think it's fair to say we focused on the platform a bit too long. We're now remedying that. Now, just to be clear, you were always able to take the platform and script it yourself. But the delta between the platform and what people need for a distributed configuration management is pretty hefty. Now, you're able to do some things, but in terms of what people really wanted, it was too much. So our investment in that area is now in desired state. So now we're turning the corner on that. We're investing heavily in a product. That product is Azure Automation. Azure Automation has a DSC Pulse server in it, and we're investing in that, and we'll continue to increase investment in that. And here's the cool part about it. That Pulse server in Azure, if you're using it against Azure instances, it is free, included in the price, costs nothing. It is also free for your first 5 instances. Okay, so, and then it costs, I don't know how much after that. So that's our story there. We're working on desired state configuration as a solution, as a product, and we'll be investing more and more. We're pretty well behind in this, but Microsoft, when the DNA kicks in, when the immune system kicks in, we're able to make progress like you cannot imagine. So I anticipate in a pretty short order, we're gonna have a pretty darn compelling answer there. But just to be clear, when it comes to managing things, we will be able to manage things the same as Chef, Puppet, Ansible. If they're using desired state configuration, they'll be able to manage SQL, et cetera, the same way. We'll just differ in features and UI, et cetera.
And one thing I want to add to this, because I live this every day, and so those of you that live with configuration management, the idea behind DSC, as he pointed out, it's a platform. It wasn't for you to go take DSC and go do stuff with it. It was for you to go get Chef or Puppet, who were using that platform to go do stuff with it. That's an important distinction. Now, I have always focused on working with customers using DSC without Puppet, Chef, Ansible to do stuff with it. But as he pointed out, now you're looking at a heavy lift. You don't have the tooling. You don't have the reports. There are things that you are missing that you need. So when I work with a customer that's going to use DSC, the first requirement is you have people that are willing to develop the tools that go around this, the databases, pulling the data, shoving the data in, making reports out of data. We've got great reporting services. But the point being is DSC is it's like, you know, it's like a Lego, box of Legos. You got to build it. It's not a finished product today like Puppet or Chef. So the decision point is, does my company need a finished product? If so, you're making a wrong decision if you're trying to do this in nothing but DSC and your own PowerShell stuff. If the company does have the resources to do the tooling, then DSC is a great option. And there's a big part of the community that's doing pure DSC stuff. And like I said, that's my focus with customers, because I have found, anybody here heard Tug? Okay, so Don Jones and Missy and a few others have been developing Tug. That's an on-prem pull server to solve some of the problems that that if you can't use Azure Automation DSC because you can't plug into Azure, Tug is an example. There's a community wrapped around this tooling now, and we're building more and more tooling, but a lot of the tooling that has been built for DSC is proprietary to the companies that have built that tooling, and they're not sharing. So just be realistic before you kind of commit when it comes to configuration management about what it's designed for. As Jeffrey pointed out, now the focus is Azure Automate, make that the product. But if that is not how you can use the product, if you can't use it through Azure, then make the right decision for the business for what they can handle. That's one of the challenges with the configuration management pieces.
Yeah, by the way, we recently had a blog post on something called DSC Core. So DSC is going down a similar path as PowerShell. And one of the benefits of this is we had a Linux version and we had a PowerShell version, and they were different, et cetera. So now it's going to be a converged base. In fact, we're going to have what is called, hierarchical LCMs, local configuration managers. At the base of it will be a native code implementation with a set of native code providers. Now, the benefit of this is it's very small, very lightweight, and can be used in lots of environments. Environments like the Azure host environments and every single Azure VM that Microsoft uses. And so, in fact, we're doing that for security purposes, and I forget what the number is now, but basically, the first half of next year we'll have many millions of these up and running. And with that, yeah, so. DSC for Cisco switches.
You have that now.
Do
No,
you?
you have it now, as long as the switch is, what's the code, that special compliancy thing? You have that now. You can do it as pass-through from a machine to the switch.
Oh,
As a matter of fact, you and I showed a video on the video we did on DSC about doing that,
Oh.
but it was so brand new that nobody had actually done it.
Ah.
Today, yeah, you can actually do that. But your switch has to be compliant to what runs OMI, and I forget what that
oh
special
yeah,
name
oh my,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, so it has to be able to run OMI, and then you can
Oh yeah, that's right.
bang the switch.
And I think Catalyst, some company that was writing for switches as well with PowerShell and everything, writing it and automating the ability to do the
Yeah.
switches.
Yeah.
They did something in Dallas last year, I think, with their
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm not optimistic about switch management, man. That area is just a goddamn mess. And so, we're using now in Azure Stack, it is a fully integrated system. So I don't know if you know that, right? So fully integrated systems, people say, oh, well, what's the price of an Azure Stack? And they'll get the price, and they're like, oh, that's a lot for 4 servers. And the answer is, wait, no, it's a fully integrated system. So you get 4 to 12 servers, you pick what you want. But then you get 2 top-of-rack switches and a BMC switch. We manage the entire thing. We manage that entire life cycle of that thing. So that's included in the price. But so what that means is we're doing lots of switch configuration. And I'll tell you, that's not a pretty world. That's not a pretty world at all.
What's the one commandlet or feature that still gets under your skin? It's not PowerShell.
Oh, man, there's so many.
It's
One that
not in PowerShell.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch. You know, people who've done a poor job. I can't tell that story unless we have beers. Should I tell that story?
These people are not under NDA, by the way.
I'll tell that story.
See, screw it.
So I had this guy come to me, and he was pretty hostile about that GD PowerShell and the F in this and the F in this, F in PowerShell screwing up this and that. And I was like, dude, okay, whoa, calm down. So tell me about this. What do you mean? Like, oh, crappy semantics. Okay, don't know what you mean. Like, I hear you, and if it's the wrong technology, you shouldn't be using it. But that said, for the problem you're trying to solve, it is PowerShell's mission to solve that problem. So I'm hearing you, but what I need to know are the details so that I can go fix whatever problem that I have. So what's wrong? Crappy semantics. I don't know what that means. What do you mean? Well, I do something, and then it doesn't do it, and then I got to put a timer. It's like, what? What do you say that again? So I run something, and it says it did it, but it didn't actually do it, and so then I don't know when it's done, so I have to put in this timer, and I don't know how long the timer is, so I put in a big timer, and then it wasn't big enough, so I got to have a bigger timer. PowerShell sucks. I said, wait a second. So let me be clear. You're calling a commandlet, and the commandlet says that it's done, but it's not done, and you have to have a timer to figure out when it's done? He says, yeah. I said, okay, well, let's be clear. That's not PowerShell. That's the commandlet. Okay, so, I mean, still your problem, and I'm going to help you solve your problem, but I just want to be clear about terminology because you can't fix things if you're not talking about the same thing. That has nothing to do with PowerShell. We call the commandlet whatever the commandlet. So which commandlets are these? And like, no, I will solve this problem for you, but you got to be clear about which of the commandlets these are. And then the mumble, blah, blah, blah. I say, wait a second, that's the ones your team developed. True story. So anyway, that guy, I think he has some, he wishes his commandlets were better.
Yeah.
So there are some issues, and
Was
it
he
is
on the
pretty
IIS
frustrating.
team by any no, sorry, that's
There
more
are
good.
some commandlets that, have this thing where you don't real, the semantics aren't tight enough. Like, hey, I want a minus weight, right? And wait until it's done.
So along that same line, going back to where you were when you were writing the manifesto, is there any major feature you wish would have made it in PowerShell language?
Well, all the manifesto made it.
Yeah, actually, the manifesto has, it's release by release kind of bore itself out. No, I will, yeah, sure. One that continually gets me is the ability to have the GUIs. So we are now writing the GUIs on top of PowerShell. We've been doing that. It's been taking a while. This new Honolulu project, right? It's all based upon remote PowerShell and remote WMI. So we're finally there. But we still don't have the do it in the GUI and show me the script. Like, really, how hard can this be? By the way, a bunch of other companies do this, and they do it well, and it's easy. Cisco, those guys are great. A bunch of people do this, and for some reason, it's just not in our DNA to do that.
Did
And
you guys ever do this with the newer server manager? And look at what it gives you?
Yeah.
And you're like, what the is this? That's the problem, right? And if you've worked with Exchange or something like that, it would give you at least the command
yeah,
that it was doing. And that
right, SCVMM did that.
SCVM.
Yeah. Anyway, so that one I'm pretty frustrated at. I haven't been able to affect change on that one. Yeah, that's the one.
So you're bringing Azure Stack on as an on-prem cloud solution. Are there plans to move or have Azure Automation as an on-prem solution?
Yes, the question was, hey, you bring in Azure on premises, what about Azure Automation? Here's the way we're doing Azure Stack. Basically, Rasinovich and I got together, our PMs got together and said, hey, what are the core things? Right now, what we're focused in on is the value proposition. How can developers write an application, a cloud-centric application that can run here and there? So that determined the services and the APIs that needed to be in both places. Now, having delivered that, we're talking to the audience and saying, what are the next things we want? And we're not so much focused in on APIs or services, but rather what scenarios. Things like machine learning or IoT or artificial intelligence, image processing. Those require GPUs and such. And trying to pick those big scenarios, and then we'll pick those scenarios, and then we'll say, okay, now what things are required to be successful from there? And that will then produce our hit list. We're in the process of gathering that information now. And now let me also now use this to pivot and make a point about dealing with Microsoft. In the past, we used to get up and give you our roadmap. We're not doing that anymore, right? And part of this is we kind of give directions, but not roadmaps. And the reason why is because we got this new leader, and the new leader said, get the heck out of your office and go talk to people. But he didn't say go talk to people and then ignore them. He said talk to people and pay attention to them. So here's the deal. If I go and I say, hey, here's my roadmap. Here's what I'm going to deliver next quarter and next year and the year after that, and here's what the plan is, here's my roadmap, and then you give me feedback. Now I can do one or two things. I can ignore your feedback, well, what was the point of that? Or I can listen to your feedback and adjust my roadmap. When I adjust my roadmap, that means I'm not going to deliver those things on that timetable. Something's got to change. So then what's the deal with that? So the net of this is that an agile, customer-focused company is not and a transparent one, is not as predictable as an enterprise-y, sort of roadmap-y, like it or leave it sort of world, right? That world, if like I don't care whether you like it or not, here's what you're gonna get, I can deliver that pretty predictably. When I'm constantly giving you drops and you're looking, you say, hey, you got that wrong, or hey, now I think you should do this, we bring that in, we account for it in the priorities, and then we shift. And when we shift, some things fall off the case. So that's sort of the new deal. And I think it's a better deal, but it is a less predictable deal. So when will Azure Automation come in? And the answer is when customers say it's needed. So.
Commentary on VS Code versus ISE.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, as far as being mature.
So let's talk about VS Code. Hey, how many people are using VS Code? Yeah?
Good.
How many people don't like it? Oh, okay, one. Okay, so that's fine.
You're wrong. No.
No. So let's talk about motivation, okay? You might have heard of this guy named Steve Ballmer. He put a little stink in the air about Linux and open source, okay? So now, as we go out and we're, now Microsoft is a cross-OS, cross-platform company, there's a little distrust there, okay? And we have some distrust to overcome. Now, I went out and talked to people, and they want management, single tool across everything, so I'm investing in Linux for PowerShell for Linux. I'm doing that port. I'm under no illusion that the Linux people are going to greet us as liberators. Like, oh, thank God, Jeffrey, I've been waiting. I've been under this oppression for so many years. Thank you, Microsoft, for coming and saving us. That's not going to happen. I'm going to walk into an environment where there's going to be hostility, there's going to be distrust, and suspicion. And I recognize that, and I'm fine with that. I need to earn their business, okay? Now, but I'm hyper concerned about it. And that they realize that we're doing this, and this is a different Microsoft. So what I was concerned about was, hey, we're doing all this great stuff on the portal, and then it hit me like, oh my God, like I'm at this great PowerShell, but on Windows, I have ISE, this fantastic graphical environment, visual editing, all this wonderful stuff, and it's not available on Linux, and is not going there. WPF is not going on Linux. So I can't port it. What am I going to do? Because I'm concerned that they're going to see this and say, see, I knew it. We're just some second-rate citizen to you, and all the good stuff's on Windows. And I was like, I can't have that. I have to be, have to be beyond reproach in our port to there. So I needed to have a great cross-platform environment where they could do at least what we could do with ISE. And so that's why we invested in Visual Studio Code. Now, it turns out, we just put this guy who is a crackerjack on this thing. I mean, he's crazy good, crazy fast, and by the way, working with the community. This is a great community project. Keith Hill is working with them. They're both awesome. Super responsive to the community. People say, oh, well, I don't like this. Try it now. What do you mean try it now? Try it now. I just fixed it. Like, what? Seriously? Oh my God, this is great. And they love it, and the community loves it, and it is moving very, very rapidly. And there have been step by step. Yeah, but there's no terminal. Oh, well, then there's the terminal. Yeah, but the terminal sucks. And then the latest version, if you've seen it, the 1.17 version, the terminal's like 17 times faster. It is crazy good, crazy good. Oh, well, there's no code folding. Latest version, code folding. These guys are moving very, very rapidly and doing a fantastic job. I think, in my mind, I think they are the showcase example of when, what did I say? When Microsoft gets it right, my God, is that an awesome force. PowerShell and the Visual Code team, that is something where we're getting it right, and man, is that an awesome force. So that's what's going on there. I think that there are still a few things that you can do in ISE, like show command, et cetera, that you can't do in VS Code. I think it's just a matter of time before, but there are other things in VS Code that are much better than in ISE. So anyway, ISE will be continued to be supported. If you can stay on ISE all you want, but you won't be able to run that on Linux. So that was, again, back to that, I like to explain the motivation so you understand why, and then you can predict. That's why I'm not going to invest more in ISE, but I'm going to invest heavily in Visual Studio Code.
The other thing is, this is the community, well, ISE is great, not knocking ISE. First of all, it's a great learning tool, right? First place to learn to write a function is the ISE. All of the great snippets, the great IntelliSense in it, it's a great product. For a lot of us in the community, there's a few problems with the ISE. One, it does one language, and in the environments I work in, there's more things than PowerShell. So we've had to use things like Sublime, which is also cross-platform. We had to use, I often used Visual Studio Code with Adam Driscoll's plugin for PowerShell, but I could get other languages. I'm a huge fan of Sapiens Primal Script, which I've used since I was a little squirt, right? That does 50 different parsing, parses out differently, because the environments needed it. If you're working purely in PowerShell, there's nothing wrong with the ISE. But there are some technical issues. On larger things that would be larger projects, the ISE falls apart pretty quick. So this is why a lot of us would use Visual Studio, get rid of the crashes, that kind of thing. Now with VS Code, we have a cross-platform product that was better than Sublime ever was, and now has achieved what we needed from the ISE, but it's completely cross-platform and is much more flexible and is becoming more flexible almost on this weekly cadence of them doing updates and modifications. So the thing is there anything wrong with using the ISE? The answer is, if it fits your needs, no. But if it doesn't fit your needs, like a lot of us, it doesn't fit our needs, VS Code is now the tool that we use. Visual Studio is really heavy. I don't want heavy. I want light, fast, because I'm starting it up, I'm shutting it down. I'm starting it up. I'm not a developer that has the damn thing running all day long. I'm starting it up, I'm shutting it down. So light, fast, feature-laden with what I need, and it does more than one language.
Yeah.
So, and the development on VS Code has astounded all of us. That's why a lot of us in the community at first looked at it going, you guys are trying to copy Sublime and you're going to not skip. What's this? Oh, wow, look at this. Wow, this kid is cranking it. Holy, yeah, this is, and so we bought it.
So here's the thing, it's an interesting sort of little problem we have here. And the problem was that, in fact, the effort is not PowerShell for Visual Studio Code. That's not the effort. The effort is PowerShell language services. So in fact, what's happening is there is a server process, or process that you talk RPC, use JSON RPC to, and it's doing all the language services, the analysis, this and this and this. And then we wrote, and the idea was that this now allows us to do great PowerShell editing in all the editors. We'll do it for Sublime, we'll do it for Atom, we'll do it for Emacs, we'll do it for Vim, we'll do it for Visual Studio Code. and we did it in Visual Studio Code, and all of a sudden, it's just so, moving so fast and is so popular, like, oh, what about these other efforts? Turns out, we just added that. So I don't know if you've seen, we now have it for Vim.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you go to the cloud console, so now, anybody use Azure? Okay, so now if you go to the Azure portal, you see that prompt there? You click on that prompt and you can run PowerShell. And PowerShell is in fact running in a container up in the cloud, and you can use it to manage everything. In that container, we put a bunch of great tools like Git and Vim. Okay, so Vim is running there, you got a console editor, and it's using the language services tool, so you get highlighting and IntelliSense, et cetera, because Visual Studio Code obviously doesn't run in a console window. So anyway, so that's what's really going on there, and if it turns out that Visual Studio Code runs out of steam at some point and some new editor comes out, we'll be able to support that very easily, because it's a great architecture.
So guys, we're getting close to wrapping up, but yes, I know you've been raising your hand for a while, so please.
So mine may be a little too personal for helping everyone, but my world is not network switches, it's storage switches.
Yes.
And, you know, the Cisco's okay, but I live mostly in Brocade because of my clients. First, a success story with PowerShell. All of my storage, so SVCs, XIDs, EMC, NetApp, doesn't matter. I can go through a command. I can say I want it output as CSV. And what do you know, it's now in PowerShell. Brocade, every command they run spits back stupid human readable code.
Yeah.
They won't change it. I've had a request on their site forever. Can you drop a Snover hammer on Brocade?
Generally, nobody listens to architects, they listen to customers. I certainly,
Here's the thing, Brocade has to go through their own process. I live with part of your pain.
Yeah.
With Brocade. Brocade has to go through their learning process on this. There are people at Brocade that are fully aware that they're doing it wrong. But you also have to understand where they're coming from.
where
They're coming from a Unix environment. So they don't necessarily understand the value to structured
Oh,
data.
you know what, here's the thing, it turns out it's great. So now, if they just run stuff that runs JSON,
I know.
yeah, so if we, and then, so if we get them on, yeah, we,
I'm with you on that.
I'd
It's
love
a-
to have
You're
this.
having to regex,
There's-
multiple spaces,
And-
it's a columnized.
But look at it this way, your skills with regex are increasing, so your management of Linux is improving.
I've been doing it for 25 years.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm with you on the Brocade thing, we're working on it. I mean,
Oh, I didn't know
not,
that.
but I mean, I'm not Brocade, but, you know, the community has that.
They
Keep
haven't even
plugging.
responded to
I know, it's, Brocade is kind of like, well, you know, Brocade is, we don't need to talk to you. So,
well, right.
just
Remember I
keep
mentioned
trying.
that revolution in storage?
You've revolutionized my world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, by the way, I don't know if you've seen, the stuff in Windows Server 2016 is amazing. The storage space is direct. Oh my God, if you have not looked at it, go look at it. The performance, now just to be clear, you gotta get, never, don't ever buy a server again that doesn't have an RDMA NIC, right? You gotta have RDMA NICs. But if you have RDMA NICs, this storage space is direct, is so fast, it's so wonderful, and so cheap, it's freakish. Freakish.
Guys, I want to, somebody had mentioned that there's some people that wanted to get some pictures with him, and he loves to take pictures with people. So in the last about 15 minutes we have before we got to scoot, why don't you go ahead and talk to him and get some pictures and stuff like that, yeah?
One last question.
Yeah.
Sure.
What's y'all's favorite Austin beer?
Ooh. Favorite Austin beer. So you know what? Here's the crazy thing. We checked into this new hotel, the Van Zandt. And we're checking in, the typical clerk thing. How's your day? How's travel? All that. And then she's like, okay, here's your room key. Here's your Wi-Fi password. Can I get you any water or some beer? I said, excuse me? So would you like some water or some beer?
And he's sending me a text, they're offering me beer. And I'm like, I'm doing a tech check over here. Get over, I'll be over after I finish my beer.
Yeah. And it was a really good beer. What the heck was it? It was like Texas with the...
I didn't take the
No,
beer.
it wasn't a Lone Star. It wasn't a Shiner
I didn't
Bock.
take the beer. I had work to do.
Oh. Seriously?
Yeah, into the hotel, give you a goldfish at your business traveler, so you have a pet.
No.
Yeah, I was
No,
thinking about,
you
can I
did
check,
not need to bring that up.
can I check out and check in like every day? Yeah. So I don't know, whatever they were serving was my favorite. But we went to Bangers. That looks like a challenge. Okay, barbecue. This is how you make friends and enemies, isn't it? Talk about Texas barbecue. So we tried to get in the line at La Barbecue. It was too long. Of course, Franklin's is burned down. Sad, sad, sad. I've never been to Franklin's. I've been to La Barbecue. That's amazing. But we went to Rudy's. Yeah, best gas station.
Gas station barbecue, best freaking barbecue I've had at a gas station.
And then I went to Lambert's. I liked Lambert's, kind of higher end, a little bit funky. And then I did Ironworks today. There you go. Who's? Oh, I haven't heard of them.
The only way to the only way to really answer that question is when somebody asks you what your favorite Texas barbecue is. All you have to say is the ones I get in Kansas City.
Whoa,
Whoa.
the ones I get in Kansas City.
Oh,
Oh,
chairs are going to be flying.
yeah, I want to make it out of this state alive.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, I used to live in Austin here before I went to Microsoft, so I had some favorites there. Yeah. All right.
Go talk to people and take
Okay.
some pictures. I'll shut this down.
Thanks, guys.
Hey.